Just want to let you know that we are live on YouTube right now. I would recommend you turn off your video until 4:30, please. Thank you.
Bless you, Patricia.
Good afternoon.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
All right, we're adding people, and once it looks like we're pretty close to our membership, we'll dive in. So if everyone can just hang out for a little bit, we'll should be there shortly.
Hello.
Hi, David.
Okay.
Well, at least it'll be easier to remember most of your names because they're written.
Well, you'll have a list. Tracy Bondi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
We have someone logged in with just a generic staff. Is there a way to identify or change?
Rename that individual.
Yep.
That
No.
is, I do need some assistance. I apologize with the,
That's Marie Rector.
thank you.
Okay. Looks like we are still missing one of our board members.
He was on an earlier call. Wait a minute.
Okay,
Maybe I can't figure out who we're missing. I don't see two of them.
Peter.
Oh, okay. I didn't see Catherine either. So
Yep,
there she
she's
is.
here.
I saw her. He was on an earlier call though, so he should be joining us shortly.
So will someone text Peter or you want me to, Mike?
If you wouldn't mind texting him, that would be great.
I will do that. So Mike, how many people you anticipate will attend? Did people RSVP?
I believe they did. I would have to pull up the calendar invite.
Yeah, I just want to have a sense of like what percentage of the like number of the attendees
Actually,
invited versus actually attending.
as usual, Jane doesn't completely trust me to not mess things up, so she hasn't given me access to see who RSVP'd, but Jane's listening, so Jane can probably take a look at the calendar invite and see what our RSVP list was. But I think we have a pretty good number to.
Oh, wait. Peter responded saying he's on the public link.
He needs to not be on the public link. He needs to, in his email, he got an updated email this morning.
Okay, you should.
And we have about 32 people, 32 people planning to attend that have confirmed that everybody got the participant link earlier today, so we may have
Okay.
more.
So Jane, can you do me a favor? Can you call Peter and walk him through, get him logged into this meeting, and we'll go ahead and begin in the meantime.
Yes, and there's no public comment.
Okay. All right, so Cynthia, I'm gonna turn it over to you to open our official board meeting, and then we'll dive into our work.
All right, so first I want to say, make sure I'm on mute. Okay, so first I want to say good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the meeting to order. So the first item on the agenda is a roll call. Superintendent Grove
Yes. President Chang,
here.
Vice President Guidry,
Here.
Clerk Hertan, not yet. Trustee Rossi
Here.
and Trustee Zhang.
Here.
Okay,
All right, I think Peter is coming, so he should join us shortly. So now do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
So move.
Catherine
Okay.
moved. David seconded, so it's a roll call since we
Yeah.
are. on this meeting.
here we go. President Chang,
Yes,
Vice President Guidry,
Yes.
Trustee Rossi,
Yes.
and Trustee Zhang.
Yes.
all right, thank you. So moving on, I heard earlier Jen say there has been no public comments regarding the agendized graduate profile item.
Correct.
Jen? Okay, so that being the case, we'll just move on to the item on the agenda, graduate profile.
Great. And I'll take over from there. So
Okay.
want to thank you all for joining us. I know these are unusual times and this is an unusual way for us to try and facilitate this meeting, but we didn't want to lose the progress that we had made and the momentum that we had. So we decided to move ahead and continue with this process. So what I've been thinking a lot as we've gone into the school closure and trying to adapt to online learning, and it's really reinforced with me the concepts that we've been talking about in terms of the skills and mindsets that we really believe are most valuable for our students as they leave us and head out into the world. This experience has only reinforced my belief of the primacy and the importance of the types of skills we've been talking about. When you think about the level of collaboration that this shift has required, when you think about problem solving, I feel like that is all I do all day long now, is kind of things that we didn't anticipate come up, and we work together, we ask questions, we come up with solutions, we implement them, we learn, we adjust, and we're you know, that saying of building an airplane as we fly it, but we are adapting, and I think our students and our staff are demonstrating grit and perseverance, because not everything has gone smoothly for our staff and not everything has gone smoothly for our students or for our families. So everyone's needing to adapt and demonstrate these qualities that we've been talking about over the last 3 months or so about what are most important. And I've also really seen significant levels of empathy. The emails that I get from parents and students really reinforces the concept. And this is, I think, this experience has brought out a sense of collective empathy that may not have been as visible before. So I found it interesting, and I'm looking forward to kind of the conversations tonight in light of the circumstances in which we find ourselves. And for me, it has only further reinforced the importance of this work that we're doing. So we obviously are using an online platform tonight. I've never facilitated a meeting this large and with this much expected dialogue in an online setting. So we're probably going to have some glitches, so just bear with us a little bit as we go through this evening.
Oh, okay, good.
And the first thing I want to do is make sure that all of you have access to and can log into a document that was shared with you via email called the master document. So if you have your email up in front of you, you should have received an email from Jane or shared with you from Google Google Docs, and it's titled Meeting 3 Master Doc is the name of the title. We would like you to have live access to that because that's gonna be the primary kind of think of that as home base during our meeting. And you're gonna need to click on the links that are included in that document to complete some of the activities that we're gonna do this evening and view resources. So if everyone can find that, I will also, in the chat function here, I will also paste the actual link for that document. I'll put that here in case you didn't get it in the email for some
So
reason.
Mike, I'm just looking at my email. It was sent to us at 4:13 p.m. just earlier, like 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, Jane shared that with you immediately before the meeting.
Okay.
So hopefully all of you can access that either through the chat link that I just shared or through the email that Jane sent.
And for the record, I saw Peter just join us. So we now have board member Hurton also at the meeting.
Great. Welcome, Peter. So as we begin tonight, I wanted to it's been a little while since we've been together. We had to postpone one of our meetings because of where we were. So tonight was intended to be meeting number 4, but it's going to be meeting number 3, and we have a meeting number 4 subsequently scheduled in May. So I want to just remind everyone of what our purposes are with this group. There's a link in the master document to something called the funnel diagram. You've all seen that before. So if you want to take a look at that document, the funnel diagram, and it is just a visual that helps define what the purposes are of each of our meetings. So tonight is really about doing a few things. Based upon the input from the group last time, we've identified some top 5 competencies, and we want to review those with you this evening. And our end goal this evening is to arrive at what we're calling convergence, because we may not reach 100% consensus on exactly everything, and that isn't necessarily the goal with a group this size. But we want to arrive at a point where everyone's comfortable and says, yes, those are those represent the key competencies that we should be striving for our students, and get at least a minimum level of buy-in for that from this group. And then we want to work on better defining what those 1 or 2 word titles mean. So describing what does collaboration mean to us for our graduate profile. So that is really our goal tonight, is to reach convergence and have some better definition. And then in meeting 4, it will really be about refining and talking about, okay, we have agreed upon the competencies and our definitions. Now, what do we do with this? What are our next steps? And how do we roll this out in our community? So that's big picture what we're attempting to achieve tonight and in our next meeting. And the last reminder I want to give before we dive into our work is just that, remember that the focus of this group is on the what. Like, what do we want to include in our graduate profile? The focus of this group is not how we are actually going to implement this, what this is going to look like in classrooms in the coming years, things like that. So we're a what group? We're an idea group. we're not an execution group right now. So just a reminder of what our roles are. Any questions? Everyone has access to the master document. We're good to go? Okay, so we're going to be doing a variety of discussions. Some we will send you into breakout groups, and that will happen automatically as a Zoom function. We're not going to pre-assign groups like we have in past meetings. So the mixture, typically in past meetings, we've made sure that we had students, community representatives, industry reps, parents, staff members kind of mixed in our groups. Zoom, I think, just sheerly randomly will hopefully get at, a pretty close mixture of that, but it may not be perfect tonight. So just, again, bear with us on that. When we have whole group conversations, we should have somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 people. And just like when you're in a live room, we need to be respectful and mindful of other people talking, not talk over other people. We're not gonna, there is a function where you can raise your hand in Zoom. We're gonna try the conversation. I ran a meeting with 25 or so people last week, and we didn't use the raise the hand function, and the discussion actually went really well, and we didn't need that. If we start feeling like our discussion is not working great just based on our numbers, then we'll revert back to using the raise your hand function and kind of use that as a way to monitor. But I think we'll be able to pull it off without needing to do that. So with all of those prefaces done, I think.
Mike?
Yes.
Mike, I have a question. When you say, because I was just at a meeting, an earlier meeting with Santa Clara County School Board Association. So what we did was we just raised our hands like on the screen so you see us. Otherwise, how you are going to recognize someone to speak if they are people coming at the same time?
Yeah, so I think we can do the physical raise the hand. The problem is with a group this large, we have 35. I'm not going to be able to see all 35 at once on my screen, right? I have to scroll between multiple screens to see that. So when we did in my meeting last week where I had 25 people, we didn't even do that. People just kind of naturally participated in the discussion and were you get a sense of when someone's wrapping up their comments, and just like we do when we're in a live room, we didn't only call on people that raised their hands when we were live. So we'll give that a try. If it's not working, then Zoom does have a function where you click on a button that says raise my hand, and then it sends it to me as the host, and then I would call on people who have raised their digital hand, if you will. But we'll try it without that first. Make sense? All right. See, Francis is giving me lots of good nonverbal feedback. Okay, so we're gonna begin with Carrie is gonna share with you kind of the input and data that we looked at in identifying our top competencies. So I'm going to turn it over to Carrie and let her lead us through that activity. And there's a link for that in the master doc meeting number 2 input. So if you can open that, because Carrie's going to be referencing that.
So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us remotely. It's so good to see your faces. I've been tabbing back and forth the screen so I can see each of you, and we sure miss you and miss being in the same room and having dinner with you. So thank you for being here this evening. For this section, we'll be looking together, as Mike said, at the master document activity 2, meeting number 2 input link, in order to understand the different feedback we received during meeting number 2. So please open that link now. So as you recall, one of the ways we collected feedback at our last meeting on February 26th was using the Thought Exchange platform. And the purpose of that was to gather initial thoughts on our guided question: what skills, mindsets, and literacies are most important to enable our graduates to thrive in the future? And after each of you shared individual thoughts, we asked you to star or rate agreement with the design team's other thoughts. We had 48 individuals participate, with about 127 individual thoughts shared and just over 1,200 ratings. This brightly colored bar chart shows the top 10 competency themes compiled from similar highest rated thoughts. So if you start on the left of the bar chart, you can see the theme of critical thinking had a star value of a 4.4, and that's on a 1 to 5 scale, with 5 being the most agreed with thought, followed closely by curiosity and learning. And that included thoughts about being reflective and intellectually curious. Empathy and heart, with thoughts around perspective taking, and then management, having to do with both time management and conflict management, all had a 4.2. And then next, global community awareness, with thoughts around valuing diversity and being global citizens. Kindness, respect, compassion, with thoughts highlighting traits that allow individuals to come beside each other. And also mindset, being able to experience failure and try again, being resilient, all had a 4.1. And then still close with a 4.0, creativity and problem solving, and persistence and communication skills, also rated in the top 10. Later in the evening, we had more discussion about the different competencies that we want to see in our graduates, and we talked about areas such as heart, mind, and skill. And we broke into 8 teams, and we asked the 8 teams to come up with a top 5 list. And so you'll see the results in this second chart. So it shows both the team results and the individual rankings that you turned in at the end of the evening. Thank you to the Magnificent Seven, the Visionaries, the REMA, High Five, the Bridge, Disruptors, Troika, and England. We tallied all of the results from the team rankings and the individual rankings and identified our top 4 to 7 competencies. We noticed that the top 5 competencies were the same, both for individuals and for the team rankings, and in almost exactly the same order. And those 5 were empathy, perseverance, communication, critical thinking, and integrity. And so for this next section, Mike's going to review the draft competencies and models. I don't see Mike on the camera, so I'm not sure if he had a technical issue, but I could just open it up to any thoughts as you reviewed the meeting feedback from meeting number 2, either from the thought exchange or from the rankings. Would anyone like to comment?
Could you explain? Okay.
Catherine?
Go ahead.
Could you elaborate a little bit about, the column of that team and individual combined total? For example, like the individual vote 24th and 20th, one is empathy and then critical thinking, it's all team. There are 7 teams ranked, and what's that mean? 7 teams ranked that as a number 1, right? But the individual, so how you arrive the final number of 31 versus 27?
So if you, like, for example, if you look at empathy, empathy had 24 individual people.
Okay.
Listed empathy as the top 5,
Mhm.
and then they had 7 teams who
I
listed
see.
it in the top 5.
Okay.
So if you recall last meeting and meeting number 2, we did 2 rounds. First, individuals kind of listed their, I think it was actually top 7, if I recall correctly. And then after individuals, so that's reflected on the left-hand column for individual votes.
Yeah.
And then we asked you to get into groups and arrive at consensus. So those are all the team rankings, team totals, and then the right-hand column is a total of the team rankings and the individual votes together.
Kathy, did you have a question as well or a comment? Oh, you're on mute. I'll have you on mute. Thanks.
Yes, I have a barking dog here. So I was going to comment along the lines of the twofold, sort of what Catherine said was just to kind of clarify where the numbers came from, but also I think it's quite telling that empathy came out so high from the team totals, because that's really what it takes to be able to work together well. And I would say that's been a huge part of the remote learning, is getting to the empathy piece.
Yeah, I was actually somewhat surprised that both the individual as well as the team rankings and the kind of demarcation between categories, or not categories, but sort of various levels, were pretty consistent. So
I just,
Oh, go ahead, Cynthia.
is that my turn? Oh, David, I'll let you go first.
Oh, it doesn't matter. I was just curious because I was trying to relate the first chart to the table after that. And I don't see curiosity learning. I guess that one shows up on the chart, but kind of ended up pretty low, unless it's maybe learner's mindset. And then I couldn't really figure out where good work management and some of these other ones, I couldn't quite relate the table or the chart to the table.
right.
Do you know
So
about that?
if you recall, we did, it was kind of a 3-step process. We did the thought exchange first, and that was complete open-ended response. We didn't give you titles of various competencies. People created their own competencies, and then you rated other people's ideas. So the titles that came up there, like critical thinking, kindness, respectfulness, and compassion, those were created by members of our committee. So we did that activity. And then we did if you recall, the top 30 competencies that the organization that kind of spearheads this nationally, Battelle for Kids, they have their top 30 competencies that come up as they do this all across the country. And so for that activity, the individual ranking and then the group ranking, you were pretty much provided with a title. So the ones that were created in the thought exchange don't necessarily match exactly these. So.
Okay, now I understand. But then I guess I would say that it's interesting that there were a couple that we came up with that weren't part of their kind of preset list.
Yeah.
And I guess you could try to map them, like that curiosity one. There is a curiosity thing separate now, I look at it. But also sort of the global community awareness that either we didn't really see that, or we when we were thinking on our own, it's interesting that we saw them as much more important than when we saw them as part of a bigger list.
Right, and so that's, part of what we tried to do was, so in thought exchange, global community awareness was what number, kind of the 5th one. And then if you look at the chart, the concept of global citizens was lower than that in that setting. So most of the things that came out of thought exchange, I think, you could fit into one or potentially, 2 of the things in the chart. And I don't want you to feel like, the competency list here, we are going to work on the language of those. What do we want that to, how do we actually want to phrase that? So we can find ways to broaden these if we want to. This was just, we want to have a starting place to work from for this evening.
So I'm going to say something. Okay. So what I need to understand is, if seems to me like empathy and integrity, I think it's a core value that we should, it's like we come up with, like, like as part of our characteristics, coming to school. So I just try to, if Mike, you can refresh my memory, how you define empathy, like how, because we are talking about competence. I totally agree. Empathy is something very important, but it's a little vague to me, like how you, I know I'm not going to get into how, I know you said we just try to come up with what. But when I look at this, I, like in empathy, I just want to make sure we have something concrete that we could actually incorporate into the deliverables,
Mhm. Right. And, we spoke about that in previous meetings with the concept of making sure that whatever we put into our graduate profile is actually something that we believe that through school and through education, that we actually have both the capacity and it's an appropriate role for the school to develop. Because you could come up with competencies that might not really fall in the purview of school, right? It might be something that is more of a family competency that, the family might be more responsible for. So I'm not commenting on empathy specifically, because a lot of people, some people would argue, and we looked at some resources around that. Some people, I think, would say that empathy is something you're born with. It's not something you learn. And there would be a lot of people who would argue against that and say, no, it's absolutely a skill and that you can develop that skill. So that is going to be, I think, part of our conversation tonight. And your question, how do you define empathy? That once we agree conceptually on our competencies, that's going to be our next part, is really diving in. And I think that's a majority of our work tonight, is really trying to define, what do we mean as a school district when we say we want our students to be empathetic, or we think empathy is a core outcome for our students? What does empathy mean to us? How do we define that? And so that is part of the breakout group work that you will do tonight.
But one more comment. If you look at this individual and group rankings, you will see for the 3 items have the same rating, right? Same rankings. The adaptability, the collaboration, and global citizens. So I think those, to me, at least one participant, to me, that these 3 are more concrete. Whereas I think empathy, what you said earlier, some people say you're born with it or you develop. I think it's both, but I think it's as important, the family and the society also have to help the students to develop that empathy. So that's just my comment. I'm not, I'm totally for empathy, but I feel if we only have 5 items as top priority, I look at the list, empathy and integrity seems to me is a core value that we expect every student, every teacher, every staff, every parents have. And it's just something perhaps need to be explored further.
So I think we're starting to get into what the intent of this activity right now is, to share with you what the feedback and the data was from last meeting, and to show you how we arrived at kind of the initial draft of the top 5 competencies. The next activity is going to be where you get into the conversation that we're starting to have, which is, do we actually think these top 5 are the appropriate top 5? And try and arrive at some convergence around that. And it could be that top 5 shifts. It could be that we, increase it. It could be that we decrease it. It could be that we decide that one of those top 5 really isn't appropriate for our graduate profile, and that we want to move something else in. So that's the next part, is evaluating these. This part, we just wanted you to understand that this is the data that you all provided us, and this is how we sort of arrived at the top 5. Okay, So any questions about the data itself or kind of process on how we arrived at the top 5? All right, then we will move on. So you may want to refer back to that document, so you may want to leave that open, but if you go back to the master document, we are moving on to activity number 3. And if you can click on the draft competencies list, and that will open up a new document for you. And Rosemary, I sent you an email and reshared the document that you said you couldn't access. So hopefully you now have access to it. Okay. So based upon the data that we just shared with you, we sort of said, okay, what number do we have? And we kind of looked at lines of demarcation, and there appeared to be a fairly clear line of demarcation around 5. If we looked for another line of demarcation, it would have been a total of 8 competencies, which is probably starting to stretch the outside of how many competencies we want to have. And as we talked through with Mike Nicholson, our consultant from Battelle for Kids, his advice was only give them 5, don't give them 8, because the likely outcome is that they're going to want to add more. So if you give them 5 and they want to add more, if you give them 8, they're going to want to add more. So his suggestion was to start with 5 and let it grow from there, rather than start with 8 and grow to 15, which isn't going to be manageable for us. So we chose 5. Please understand, you see how it has draft everywhere in red. These are just the initial 5 that we want to start our conversation with. We present them in this document in 2 different ways. If you recall, last meeting we talked about Angela Duckworth's work around the various mindsets and the 3 kind of strengths. So the strengths of heart, the strengths of mind, and the strengths of will. So I took our top 5 and broke them into, if we were to kind of view our competencies through that lens of the various strengths, how would they fall out? And we had 2 that would fall into strengths of heart, 2 that would fall into strengths of mind, and 1 that would fall into strength of will. So just one lens through which you can look at the initial competencies. One of the conversations that we had last time is, do we want to emphasize a particular strength or not? And the feedback from this group was, no, we should try and make sure that we are addressing all of those strengths. And, given that we have an odd number, we did our, I think it actually came out to where it does broadly represent all 3 of those strengths. And then the other lens that we provided here, they're the same exact 5 competencies, but we broke them down. If you were to think of them as sort of, traditional skills versus traditional, what people would think of as qualities or characteristics or mindsets, we divided them in that way. So communication and critical thinking being more traditional skills, and empathy, integrity, and perseverance being more kind of qualities or mindsets or characteristics that people have. And I think a lot of people can argue that empathy, integrity, and perseverance are all skills that can be taught, but so just wanted to provide different lenses and ways of thinking about them. So any question on that? And no? Okay. So then the next activity for us is that, Carrie, I'm going to let you kind of introduce this activity. And while you do that, I'm going to get the breakout rooms set up.
Okay, so for activity number 4, for this section, we will be looking at the discussion questions and documents in the master plan activity 4. And we're going to be breaking you up into Zoom breakout groups using the feature to provide feedback on our draft competencies. In your groups, you will have 20 minutes to discuss the draft competencies and the discussion questions included on the master document. What we really want you to talk about in your group is, do these 5 competencies make sense? Are they a reasonable set of competencies? Do they seem to be connected and holistic? Are we missing any? We'd also like you to please review sample graduate profiles and have a discussion about language and structure. What structure might we want to use with our competencies? Adjectives, nouns, a mix of those, 1 or 2 word titles, or descriptions about our students. We would like you to please have one person be a note taker and take some notes and be willing to share out with the larger group when we come back. So Mike is setting up the small groups, the share outs right now, which you'll be assigned to in basically random order. And one person, if you could be the moderator and a note taker to share out, we'll come back in 20 minutes. So it's just about 5:15. Go ahead, Mike.
Good. No, go ahead and finish up and then I'll.
So it's just about 5:15. So for 20 minutes, and then we would come back. Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna assign you into breakout rooms. It'll automatically send you into a room. If you have a question, there's a function that you'll see that says, I think, ask the host a question or something like that. And then that sends me a notification and I can jump into your room and answer any question that you have. So again, your group really has 2 tasks. One, to kind of discuss the initial 5 competencies, and then to look at and have some recommendations around what do we want our language to look at? Do we want it to be a single noun like communication, or do we want to phrase it more, we want our students to be strong communicators? So think about kind of language conventions. Look at, there's the link in the master document will take you to the Battelle for Kids website, and there's dozens and dozens and dozens of sample graduate profiles there, and you can see how different districts have chosen various language and structures. So just look at those as models. Okay, any questions before I send you off into your rooms? All right, see you soon.
Someone did ask in the chat about where
We are back.
Oh, where are the rest of the group?
They're coming back. They have 15 seconds left and they'll get,
Yeah,
they'll get pushed back with us.
they're coming.
Hi, Wei Jing. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, sure.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had good discussions, and Carrie's gonna kind of finish up this part of the activity, and you're on, Ms. Bosco.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. At this time, we'd like to do a share out. So if the person that took notes and would be willing to share out, we'd really appreciate it. So I had the opportunity to sit in a group, and so I'll just nominate Kathy to go first if she would be so kind.
Okay. I remember to unmute. So we had a really nice discussion where we all basically agreed that the 5 were good, but we wanted to flesh them out more. And we also looked at some of the graphics and had definite preferences. So it came down to, we wanted to somehow get collaboration, adaptability, and global citizenship into it. How that looks, we thought you could put communication and collaboration together, adaptability and perseverance together, empathy and global citizens. And then when we looked at some of the samples, we really liked the one from Howard Suamico, S-U-A-M-I-C-O. It was a circle. We all liked the circle images and liked the idea that you have a very clean graphic, but then when you add details, which we thought was important, they stayed sort of distinct and talked about what a person with those details did. Did I cover it, group? Okay, that was our groups.
Okay, so in terms of for your particular group, in terms of language, did you said that the one example that you liked, you talked a lot about the visuals, which we'll spend more time on the visuals at our next meeting. I'm trying to get a sense of if you had preferences on language that, do you prefer a one word like noun, or do you prefer something that's more descriptive of students that might be 1, 2, or 3 words?
Both. So we liked, in the ring, we liked clean 1 to 2 words, right? In the graphic, which is why we linked them. But then we liked being able to see additional details that was more of a phrase about what a person would do that had these. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, do we have another volunteer?
Go ahead, Izzy.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to be speaking on behalf of our group. So we thought the representation was very, very accurate, but we did have a few things that came across in the conversation. We thought that resilience goes with both with perseverance and empathy. So maybe we could perhaps broaden that. And then we also spoke about how empathy is very evident in schools. It's modeled at home, but for example, we're speaking about how in English class or literature class, we present piece of work in the classroom. So that's like one example of how we analyze empathy in the classroom. And then we discussed how design thinking of empathy piece like helps balance all of the other qualities because it's life skills. And then we also had some subset ideas because resilience, perseverance, and adaptation kind of all like are intertwined with each other. Then we had the idea that basic leadership was kind of expected to be higher on the list. We were expecting to see it, but we didn't. So maybe we considered that a subcategory of empathy. And another skill missing was creativity, and we thought that really needs to be encouraged in our area that we are living in. In terms of the word and the phrasing, we all agreed that we should keep it short and sweet, because it's important to have one word descriptions. Or what we're also thinking was, when you look at like the table and the representation of all the skills, maybe to have one word for each category. For instance, exhibit empathy or stuff like that going down, and then we could have another. So that was for us.
Thank you, Izzy. We have another volunteer.
Rosemary, you're muted.
Now I,
There we go.
okay. Well, our group was quite to the point. We all agreed that these 5 competencies make sense, and they're very important. We did have a few additional skills that we felt could be included, such as technology literacy, financial skill, learner's mindset, creativity, and we did feel that collaboration, if we had a well, I don't want to say if we had a 6th category, but we felt collaboration was very, very important. And for the sample profiles, we preferred the adjective noun mix. And I forgot which school, something Eagle, I think, maybe somebody on my team could help me, was a good example.
So can you describe what you mean by adjective noun mix?
Critical, like exhibit. Well, that's actually a verb, isn't it?
More like descriptive.
But more
describing the person. Yeah.
Right. Right, descriptive, describing what that person would look like.
Like instead of just communication, like effective communicator.
Right.
Got it. So we want some sort of, your group wants some sort of modifier for the noun.
Right. Yeah. Be it adjective,
a verb or adverb or got it.
Thank you. Our group was talking about that too, with making it about the graduate. So like what you said about communication becomes effective communicator. It's about the person. Another group?
Emily, go ahead.
Hi, you guys. I was going to just piggyback on what Kathy had shared, because our group came up with the same categories, actually, like exactly. But we sort of organized it back under the strengths of heart, strength of mind, and strength of will, because we felt like that was a really important way for different parts of our community to identify with this. Parents, students, teachers, all of the above. So under strengths of heart, as it was on the model that you provided, we had just empathy and global citizenship together, and then integrity. And then under strengths of mind, we put communication and collaboration together along with critical thinking. And then under strengths of will, we just have perseverance and adaptability. And then otherwise it was pretty much the same. And I like the idea of putting the language toward the graduate. That may or may not be easier for some than others. But in terms of how to represent this, we kind of agreed that less is more. Keeping it more of a graphic representation and not making it too wordy, I think is going to be important for all the different stakeholders in the community to be able to understand and access. And then I also just wanted to piggyback a little bit on Izzy. I loved that she mentioned creativity, and that's a piece that I think relates to all of these things that I don't otherwise see listed. So I think that's just really important as well.
Thank you, Emily. Do we have a fifth group?
Francis, go ahead.
So all of us agreed and were in agreement that the 5 were just fine. We thought that it was more important how we lived them out and how we brought life to the 5 rather than, looking at specific ones or how we're adding to it. With that said, though, we did want to broaden perseverance, and we were thinking that perseverance could mean being resourceful or being resilient. So we wanted to expand that. And we were also just talking about just the importance of bringing what the 5 or however many early on and introducing them to families and students early on so that they could grow into them, because really however many competencies or whatever we choose, they're going to grow on that. I mean, the 5 would become the stepping stones towards other competencies that they would grow into in college and in adult life. So it's not an end all is what it is. In terms of the wording or what were the different examples, we also liked the simple one word, very clear, one word kind of a thing. And I think somebody alluded to the Howard Sumiko School District. And then underneath the one word, we liked having the definition on the bottom so that we could expand on that. We also we talked a little bit about the Goshen local schools in Ohio. And that one has, I guess you could say, like a verb with a noun, where they have, let's see, fearless learner, effective communicators. And I think we grabbed onto that one because that was a different way to add on more competencies and kind of expand that. But we liked it kind of simple and to the point, and then kind of a definition underneath it.
Thanks, Francis. Another group?
I think we just have one left, and that would be David, right?
I guess I'm the last. We're definitely one of the groups. So we actually spent a little bit of time at first talking about, and we used empathy as an example of the idea of teaching something that's kind of inherent in many ways or stuff. And there was generally a definite consensus within the group that is something that can be taught and can be reinforced, and that those are kind of key features that we want to do. But it is, even though it is tough, and it's being taught at younger ages already. So it's definitely something that we need to get in there. We then kind of talked about, do we like the 5? There was overall a consensus that we liked the 5. Overall, we'd liked, kind of keeping the list short and not having a lot. There were a couple of us that would have liked some other ones. I know was one that really would have liked to have seen creativity or kind of love of learning on the list. There was also a push to have global citizen on the list, although there was kind of a pushback that fits within empathy and some of the in communication. So that kind of got us to a discussion about the one of the things that a lot of the group really liked, which is that this is really a great list to start with, and then you can kind of incorporate a lot of the other ideas into those 5, so that you can take those 5 and then you can do a lot more with them. And so when you get to the wording part, we liked the simple words. We had some English teachers, so we want consistency, all nouns or all verbs, or so that they're the same across all of them. But just very short, simple words like empathetic or empathy is kind of the way we would want to go. In terms of, we really liked the wheel designs. So the ones that had wheels were the ones that we liked the most. The one that popped up for us was Henrico County Public Schools, which is on actually page 2. But they did that kind of thing where they have kind of a wheel, and we really enjoyed that kind of a look to it. And I think that kind of covers it. Did I miss anything, group?
So I think it's Henry Core Learner. Oh, Henry Core. Okay, so that's Henry Core Schools. Right.
Yeah, Henrico County.
Okay.
Thank you so much, David. And that, I believe that was 6 groups, so I'm pretty sure we got everybody. Is that right, Mike?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, great. So we're planning a short break coming up, but before the break, we would ask you to go back to that master document one more time for meeting 3. And there's a survey.
So Carrie, before we dive into that, I just want to try and summarize a little bit so that we're kind of clear on the outcomes of this activity. So I'm hearing that all 5 of the group, I didn't hear anyone saying that one of the 5 should be removed at all, that you're comfortable with the 5. I'm hearing some interest in, I heard the concept of creativity come up among several groups about finding potentially. And so our decision really needs to be, do we want to create a 6th or separate or 7th separate competency, or do we want to try and weave concepts like creativity? I heard collaboration pretty consistently, and I heard global kind of mindset. Could we weave that into empathy, or do we want that? So I guess what I'm looking for is, did any of the groups feel like we need to add a new separate competency, a 6th or 7th competency? And so I guess that's first question.
So I can speak for group number 1. Group number 1, we didn't feel like we had to add it. Yeah, we all wish there were 1 or 2 others like creativity and collaboration, but we felt like they could be woven in.
Okay. And Chris?
I was going to say, and Izzy mentioned this as output from our group, but I was really surprised from the collective input that leadership wasn't higher on the list, because I actually do believe, and that is one of the key things that we need to try to inculcate into all of our young people, is the ability to step up and be leaders when the time comes. So,
okay. Any other individuals or group kind of,
we just sort of tried to wiggle in the other 3. So it's really 8, but we made it look like 3 columns under the 3 different categories. But I do think, looking at it for me personally, I'm missing seeing creativity in there, because I think that is really important. And I think I'm just sort of struggling personally with not knowing quite what column that fits in, because I think it fits in all 3. And I don't quite know where else to put it. So that's just.
And I think, and I think I joined in your group when you were discussing some of that. And creativity, I think if we seek to include that either as its own competency, or seek to weave it into the description of a different competency, that we keep a pretty broad definition of what we mean by creativity. As I mentioned, oftentimes people hear creativity as one of the, the 4 C's, and it's heavily emphasized in the Common Core standards. And a lot of people think of creativity as artistic creativity. And that, I think, in our context is a subset of creativity. And what we're really talking about is intellectual creativity, creativity in problem solving, coming up with innovative solutions, coming up with new ideas rather than just regurgitating old ideas. So if we do include creativity, I want to make sure that we keep a broad perspective on what we mean by creativity and how we might weave that, either establish it as a separate competency or weave it in.
I'm on the same page totally. And I think the same way to think about that in terms of creative problem solving is necessary with like the leadership that just came up, and the kids that we have at our school, I do believe will go on to be tomorrow's leaders. So that creative problem solving is going to be critical.
Okay.
Michael.
And I think our group, sort of put it in those additional 3 pieces. And we thought, for example, the collaboration, I think it was from the Daniel's, idea about, collaboration, and then the communication, really work together like that. And also the perseverance, actually, for this type of the character or the competency, we thought the adaptability, it's like from the 2 angle, look at the same thing. So that's why we put in those 3, as Kathy mentioned, in those 5 category, but we do think those are the important competencies should be there.
Okay.
Mike?
Terry, go
Michael,
ahead.
it seems to me that we need to keep in mind that just because a competency isn't listed doesn't mean that we're promoting incompetence in that area. It's like saying, which of your 21 children do you love the most? We love them all. They're all important, but we did pick the top 5. And I think the top 5 really do capture what we think what makes sense for our community. And we may be able to weave some of these others in as nuances of the various 5.
Yeah, and I'm trying to, as we sit here and kind of talk, I'm trying to come up with sort of a short list of concepts or other competencies that we want to try and weave in. And what I have so far are collaboration seemed like a kind of very consistent, and it was, it was very close on our rankings. If we were to go to 7 or 8 competencies, collaboration would have been one of them. So I'm hearing collaboration, I'm hearing, adaptability, which I think can fit in with perseverance. I'm hearing the concept of kind of wanting to make sure that global mindset, but that, I also heard that could be woven into empathy. And then I'm hearing intellectual creativity. And then Chris made an argument for leadership. Any other kind of key things? Because our next activity is going to involve doing exactly what you're talking about, which is coming up with precise words for the title of a competency. And I heard kind of consistently that people want to keep the title of our competencies to be short, but student focused, meaning that it should be a student outcome, not just a plain noun, not just communication, but we want effective communicators. So that will be the language convention we will go with, is short, but descriptive of students. And then if there's, I have on the list intellectual creativity, global mindset, adaptability, collaboration, and leadership.
I would still like to see financial literacy in there somewhere. I've been told it can be slid in or woven into critical thinking, but I strongly feel like it's more than balancing a checkbook that I'm thinking about. The financial literacy kind of covers a lot of ground. I don't know where it can be woven in exactly, but I think it should be woven in.
But cannot
So,
actually.
and I think going back to Terry's point, we need to remember that simply because something isn't explicitly stated here doesn't mean that it's not going to be taught or valued in our curriculum. We're trying to prioritize, because we can't have a list of 20 competencies and expect that we're going to make any, that's going to drive us. So
Mike?
Go ahead.
We actually have economics class taken by older students. So the financial literacy could have well been part of the curriculum being taught already. I'm not on top of it right now, but that's just an example. But and also when you talk about global mindset, how is it different from global citizen?
I think those are probably pretty interchangeable terms. And, you know, I would say that financial literacy, I think at the level that Tamara's talking about it is generally not taught in an econ class. That might be something that they kind of throw in as a, you know, a weak unit at the end of the class in, you know, May or June or something, but it's not the full-blown kind of financial literacy that I think most of us believe our kids need to be successful.
So I wanted to throw in one, I'm very sympathetic to what Chris is saying with leadership. I think that I'm trying to figure out how I can merge it within empathy and communication as being kind of key parts of it, and integrity definitely. So in some ways, all of, you know, most of these competences, pretty much all of them are key elements of leadership. So you could probably find a way, but I'm very sympathetic that that one is a big one. I'm less confident with collaboration. I just find that if you're empathetic and you're a good communicator, then you are going to be pretty good at collaboration. And I'm not sure, in my opinion, that it rolls up as a big area, that it needs its own type of thing. I'd much rather see something like creativity or intellectual curiosity or something like that coming in first, and then trying to weave the collaboration into some of the other ones. That's just my feeling on that.
Okay, yeah, and I guess I'm not hearing groups or large numbers of people advocating that we add a sixth competency necessarily. I'm hearing more that people want to ensure that some of these other ideas are reflected in our descriptors and how we kind of define these things. Is that an accurate statement? Okay. So with that, I'm gonna kind of turn it back over to Carrie, because I just wanted to make sure that we were good as kind of a concrete outcome of this, because that shapes our next, not our next, but the defining activity that comes up shortly.
So this is your opportunity to speak about our discussion a little more individually. It's a Google form, and it is in activity 5. Now that we've shared out from our groups, we've had a discussion, we'd like for you as individuals to please click the link and complete the convergence survey. This will help us assess where we stand as a group on the draft competencies. We ask you please take a few minutes now to complete the survey, and then we will have a short break. This would be a good time to stretch or grab a refreshment, and we'll come back in 15 minutes. The questions in the survey say, do you support the draft competency set under consideration as a building block, knowing the design team will have a chance to offer more ideas for refinement? Yes, let's go. This seems like a reasonable set to build on to better support our students. That's these current 5. Yes, but can this design team check back in once more at the next meeting to see how it sits between meetings? Or yes, I'd like the leadership team to work more with the competency set before they make a decision. I know we have to move on. Or no, I have too many reservations. So if you're someone that feels that we really need a 6th or 7th competency, you might check the box, yes, but I'd like the leadership team to work more with the competency set. If you're okay with the set exactly as it is, you'd probably check the top box. And then if you're in the space where you're thinking, yes, these 5 are good, but I'd like to see some of these other concepts incorporated into the 5, you would check the middle box, yes, but can this design team check back to build on at the next meeting to see how it sits between meetings. And then at the bottom of that, you can see just a graphic representation with the current 5 in draft. So right now it is just about 6:10. So we'd like you to take just a couple minutes to do that poll and then a short break. And Mike, just to confirm, would that be 15 minutes?
I actually don't think we're going to need a full 15 minutes for what you and I need to do after we get the survey results. So I think it's 6:09 right now. So I think we can be back at, why don't everyone, get something to eat, stretch, use the restroom, and let's be back by 6:20 at the latest.
Okay, so 11 minutes, we will see you again.
please do the survey before you go on your break. Thanks. Okay, everyone, as you start to come back, we have, other than Carrie and myself and Tracy, who's helping us on the tech end of it, we have 31 committee members and we got 30 responses on the survey. So if somebody forgot to do the survey before they went on break, if you can, it's literally a 1-question survey. So if you can knock that out quickly if you can. Okay. Carrie, you want to share the results of the poll?
Happy to. Just want to welcome everybody back. It's just about 6:21, and so I'd like to welcome you back. Thank you so much for taking this poll. You guys are doing amazing with this remote learning process. I'm so impressed. I was so nervous about it, and I'm just so thankful for each of you and clicking through our links and participating in the discussions and surveys. Thank you so much. Okay, so of our poll, we had 30 respondents.
Now
and
we're up to 31 now.
we're at 31.
All right.
Okay, let me refresh. I'm going to refresh it just to make sure. Okay. So with our 31 respondents, we have 45% saying, yes, let's go. This seems like a reasonable set to build on to better support our kids. So just about half of you are saying, yes, these 5 competencies are ready to rock and roll. And then about a third of you, 32.3% say yes, but can this design team check back and once more at the next meeting to see how it sits between meetings? So maybe just a little more thought and refinement about it. And then 22% saying yes, but I'd like the leadership team to work more with the competency set. And we didn't have anyone in our team say, no, I have too many reservations. So thank you so much. That will help us lead into the next activity.
Yeah. So we have some level of yes from everyone in the group, which is kind of what we had hoped for, and we will continue to refine. If you go to back to the master document, our next activity, which is activity number 6, is where we start to work on defining what we mean and describing what we mean around these competencies. So if you go back to the master document, I'm going to assign you back into small groups. We will have 5 groups this time, and each group will be assigned 1 competency to work on. We are going to ask you to revise the competency itself. So per our agreement, instead of it being communication, it'll be something that describes effective communicators, or however you decide to kind of revise the title of the competency. We would like you to do that. Then we want you to draft what we're calling a starter description for your competency, which is going to be kind of a bulleted list that helps to describe and define what we mean. And then we're also going to ask you to brainstorm some visual representations, because words communicate meaning, but visuals also communicate meaning. So if you would open, there's a link there. And before you open it, there's a link to a competency description template. Now, when you click on that, it's going to force you to make a copy of this template. So everyone is going to be forced to make a copy. Once you're in your groups, we want you to choose one person to be your note taker and your spokesperson. That person is going to record all of your notes in the template and share that template with Carrie and myself. The rest of you, the template is just so that you see the same you're all looking at the same document. You're not going to be able to see what your note taker is writing in there So just kind of recognize that. And if you can go ahead and open up that, that document, and we'll kind of walk through that briefly here together.
And when Mike says share it with myself or him, we will add our email addresses, if you don't already know it, into that meeting doc.
It's in the document.
Oh, it's in the document. That makes it easy.
Okay, so everyone is into the competency description template. All right, so at the note taker, whoever it is, we want you to change, and your facilitator, note taker person, ideally it would be somebody who has some experience and skills with Google Docs. It would make things a lot easier. So first thing is we are going to want you to change the title of your doc to your competency. So if you get assigned to the empathy group, just change the title of the document to empathy. Simple as that, okay? The top of the document has a sample kind of starter definition, and it's only used to illustrate the format. So you see, the format there is initiative takers. It's descriptive of a student. And then it has bullets that sort of list and help to describe what we mean. So the guiding sort of concepts and questions, the intent here is to try to clearly articulate the meaning of this competency to both somewhat to ourselves, but especially to people who did not participate in this process. Our conversations, we have a shared base level of understanding somewhat of what these words mean, but this is going to go out to thousands of people who didn't participate in this process. And the goal is that this guiding document, our graduate profile, helps to guide the work of our school district for many years to come. So, 5 years from now, we want this graduate profile to still be around, but there are going to be a whole bunch of new people who are going to look at this, and we want them to understand what we mean by empathy based on the descriptions that we have. So you want to think about what are the key components, concepts, descriptors that help to explain what is meant by this competency. And try and think of your description as a rubric of sorts. If our graduates were to fulfill the list of bullets that you create, would you feel comfortable saying yes? Or if a student was able to check those off and say, yep, I did, or a teacher checked them off, if you had 5 bullets, would you then feel comfortable saying, yes, if the student does those 5 things, they are empathetic or they are an effective communicator? Okay, so sort of think about your bullets almost like a rubric. So those are the kind of guiding concepts for this. The logistics, as I mentioned, identify a facilitator, note taker for the group. Someone with Google Doc experience is preferable. Rename only the facilitator's notes doc should match the competency that you're working on. And then that facilitator should share that document with edit rights with both Carrie and I. I listed our email addresses there. So step 2 is to review some potential resources. If you recall, in meeting number 2, we provided little cutout cards that had competencies and then the descriptions that Battelle for Kids has for those competencies. Linked in, there's a link there that says definition cards. That's going to take you to the 5 definition cards that Battelle for Kids. So it'll just give you an example of how Battelle defines empathy and how Battelle defines. You don't have to use that. You may like it, you may not, but it's just there as a resource. I encourage you to do Google searches while you're in your meetings and conversations. Just Google definition of empathy. And there's lots of really good resources and things out there that you can find. So do a little bit of research, and then based upon that, start to fill out the little table there. First, you're going to put in the title, and it should use the nomenclature that we've discussed. So a descriptor, a short, maybe 1 to 3 word descriptor of the competency, title for the competency. And then down below that, a bulleted list of descriptors. We don't want that list to be, I think we're probably looking in the neighborhood of maybe, 5 to 6 bullets tops. We don't want a list of 25 bullets. Okay. Then after you've come up with your written descriptions, then we would like you to dive into visual representations. Think about, for your particular competency, what are some visuals that might, and again, I would encourage you to do Google image searches, go out and just kind of find some visuals. When you identify 3 to 4, or 3, 4, 5 of what you believe are the best images, then we ask the facilitator, there's a link there. When you open that, it'll give you a folder for your competency, and just drop your visuals into that folder. And then, the last part, step 5, is where, based on conversation, if anything comes up and if you say, we really think maybe we need a 6th competency, that's where you would put that in. Got it? Questions on process? What is being asked of you? Okay, so this is going to be a chunk of work. So we're going to give you about half an hour to work on this. I will pop in and out of your groups and check to see how we're doing time-wise. If we're ahead of schedule, we'll end that piece early. If we need a little bit more time, we have some flexibility with that as well. So I'm going to assign you into groups. They will be different groups. So hang on, and you'll be kicked into a group. Your group will be already titled with the competency that you are assigned. So actually, I don't know what it looks like inside there, but I think there will be a title in there somewhere. I'll jump into each group and make sure you know which one you're working on. Okay, here we go. You quit, Peter, and jumped back. You had enough of the small group. You're muted. I can't hear you. Peter, you're muted.
I get bonus points for every minute early.
Oh, okay. Extra credit.
Extra credit, yes.
I can see although I don't actually think this about you, but with that, because I would guess that you were probably a student who really was interested in learning, but that comment about, I get extra credit for every minute I'm early, we call that grade grubbing.
Yeah, I'm a grubber.
I can't hear anything.
No one's talking, that's why.
Oh, good. I was thinking. My husband just came up. So,
So Mike, is there a characteristic of the students who sit in the front row?
I don't think there's an official title for those, like grade grubber, but no. I know you're a first row guy.
Partly because of nearsighted.
Okay, looks like everybody is back, so welcome back, and thank you for the work in the groups. We're not going to share out as an entire group. We're going to take a look at those documents, and then we'll try and weave everything together into a little bit more finalized draft that we'll share with you in the future. But just any perspectives on how easy or difficult it was to describe and define the competency that you were assigned? No, everyone's thinking about going to dinner or dessert.
I think, no, Mike, I think in ours, we're doing communication. I think a lot of the other competencies kind of really, you're like, oh, but isn't that critical thinking? And oh, but isn't that? But, so we saw a lot of intertwining. So that was just something that we were discussing.
Yeah, I was going to mention something similar in our group. We kind of tried to find ways to weave other competencies, maybe especially some of the ones that had not made the cut, to make sure that they somehow got incorporated into ours as well, so that we still had those thoughts in there.
We even underlined the words when they occurred so you'd notice that they're in there.
Okay, great. I like cues, they're helpful. Okay, so I'm gonna turn it back over to Carrie to do one quick activity in terms of seeking some feedback, and then I will give a little bit of preview of what our next steps are, and then we'll be done for the evening.
Thanks you guys for your time in the breakout session. I was in the Perseverance group, and we just had such a lively discussion. Our students really gave us a lot of insight. So thank you all for your participation. We'd like for you to please just take a few moments. And again, just like in meeting 1 and meeting 2, please fill out a feedback form for us. If you look at the meeting 3 master doc, it's activity number 7 titled feedback form. It's a Google form. And just give us a quick couple of responses in those areas. We'll give you about just a few minutes to do that before we close. Thank you so much. So if you got a chance to complete the survey, could you just give a thumbs up? Okay, it looks like a few people just finishing up. So maybe one more minute, Mike.
Yep, sounds good. I think Heath Clark wins for the best location to do this meeting. He's sitting in his backyard in the sun, enjoying himself. You're muted, I can't hear you.
Front yard. I'm like the mayor of my my end of the block here. I got
You're the mayor of Central Avenue, right?
Central Avenue.
Uh-huh.
You look like you're an outdoor restaurant. Can we come and have dinner at your place?
You know, I got chairs spread out on the driveway. You are welcome. You are welcome. Safe distance apart.
Okay, so in closing, I want to kind of just give you a little bit of a preview of what will occur from here. We're going to take the draft competency descriptions that you created, both your titles for your competency as well as the descriptors themselves, and we will work to refine those, try and come up with some consistent kind of nomenclature for how we both phrase the titles themselves as well as the descriptors so that we have consistency. We will, I think, come up with an initial visual for our graduate profile. And that's actually a service that Battelle for Kids provides. They have graphic designers. So we give them our kind of content and they come up with some various visuals. So next time we'll get into the visual representation a little bit more. We will share both visuals, potential visuals with you, as well as the draft competencies and descriptors. We'll share those with you before next meeting so that you have some time to kind of look at them, think about it, digest it before we meet. And then in meeting number 4, it's really about kind of refining those competencies, the descriptors and the visuals, and then diving into some kind of conversations around talking points about what are the key messages about our graduate profile, our process, how it was developed, why it's important, what it means for us. So doing some, having some conversation about that, having some conversations around how do we make this real so that this is actually meaningful for us moving forward. So we'll begin to dip our toe a little bit into the how next time. And then a little bit of conversation about how do we roll this out in our schools and in our broader community. So that's kind of a preview of what our next meeting and next steps will look like. And other than that, I just wanted to say thank you. Despite trepidations of how it was going to go running a group of 35 people, I feel like it went pretty well. We were pretty efficient. I love the breakout feature. It works pretty well for doing this sort of work. So thank you for your flexibility and patience as we kind of figured this out, and for your, mostly for your time and thought and effort into helping us create this.
Mike, I have a question regarding the timeline. So the next meeting we have is in May. And then what, from that point on, then what happened?
From that point on, our graduate profile, in terms of the creation of our graduate profile, will be done. And then the next steps is that staff comes up with a plan on, okay, how do we work to actually, what's our implementation plan essentially, will be the next steps. The graduate profile, as we had discussed as a governance team, is that once this group kind of blesses our graduate profile, it would go to the board for formal adoption. And then that would be the first sort of kickoff of our kind of next steps for implementation.
So I have a clarification question. Earlier, I think we have 4 choices. luckily we did not have anyone, have like reservation, just like saying, no, we don't go ahead to do it. But the first one, what percentage was it? Let's do it. What percentage?
That was a tiny bit over 45%.
Okay, and then the second and the third was like taking a little slower pace.
It was just wanting to give some, it was basically, yeah, I think I'm good with it, but I want to give it a little bit of thought between now and the next meeting and then come back to it at the next meeting, which is the intent anyways.
Okay, so I think at the next meeting, people will still be able, so it's like not a done deal that
correct.
Next meeting will be the last meeting.
Right, we take all the feedback and what you have given us, we come up with a next draft, and then we will share that with the committee members before the next meeting so that you have time to look at it, think about it, and then at the next meeting we will try and do the final refinement and have, that's one of the key outcomes of that next meeting, is that we have a refinement that the group says, yes, that's ready to present to the board.
And then, so in terms of number of participants, this time I see we have 33 participants.
Correct.
And the total number started with what, 40 or 45?
I don't remember the exact number, but it was, I want to say it was 48, something like that.
Okay, so for our next meeting, will we try to invite everybody back still, or just limit it? Okay.
Yeah. Everyone was invited to this one. Everyone will be invited to the next one.
Okay. All right. So if that's the case, are we ready to adjourn the meeting?
Unless anybody else has any further questions or comments, I would say yes. Look at Izzy's smile. She's so excited that we're adjourning.
So do I have a motion to adjourn our meeting out of my fellow board members?
We don't need an emotion, but I'll make one.
Yeah, just make a motion. David made a motion and Catherine seconded. So all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried.
And thank you all of you for doing this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Really
Thanks,
good.
everyone.
Yeah.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.